There we go. Okay, so let's start our conversation about retail readiness. And I'm really excited to start it by introducing you to our two expert speakers. First, we have Amie Kesler. Amie is the founder and CEO of Carolyn's Krisps, a brand redefining snack time with dairy-free, gluten-free treats inspired by a beloved third-generation family recipe perfected by her granny Carolyn. These one-of-a-kind cookie crackers combine the look and texture of a cookie, but with the crisp and crunch of a cracker. Comfort snacking with elevated taste, better for you ingredients, and a format entirely new to the market. Before launching Carolyn Krisps, Amie built a multifaceted career spanning art direction, graphic design, fashion design, and magazine publishing. She has led indoor design for big box retailer, developed and managed the brand identity for startup Insurtech company, and launched her own sustainable fashion line. At the heart of every role was a common thread, bringing people together through creativity, storytelling, and thoughtful design. Now, Amie's art has taken on a new form, food, drawing from her design background, entrepreneurial spirit, and deep family roots in baking. She created a snack that's inclusive for all, no matter dietary needs or preferences. For Amie, Carolyn's Crisps isn't just about the product, it's about the connection, the community, and carrying on a legacy of love, one crisp at a time. Welcome, Amie.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you guys.
Yes, we are so excited to have you here. And next we have Prince Michael Jett, former Go Fresh and local supplier accelerator for the Kroger Company headquarters. Michael currently supports domestic and international supply chain infrastructure zones and is the national ambassador for autism in the workplace. Michael is well versed in storytelling, discovering products, readiness assessment, resource connectivity, guiding brand owners on introduction to buying teams, and mentoring suppliers pre and post guidance while navigating their on the shelf journey. It's so great to have you here, Michael.
Hello, good to be here.
Wonderful. And everyone in the chat, you'll see the ways that you can stay in touch with both of our speakers today. So, Michael, I want to start with you. What does being retail ready mean from a buyer's perspective, and what key requirements should small businesses be prepared to meet?
hmm well, to be considered retail ready, that means that you're on the shelf ready, if you will. So to be able to be on the shelf ready, that means at minimum that you're really fitting their compliance standards. So for Anchor Retail, that means at minimum you know you have your NutraFact information. You understand your ingredients, so your raw materials, but the most important is your order hierarchy. A buyer cannot buy unless they can order. And the only way that you can order is if you have a barcode from GS1. GS1 is the only organization that can provide you with a barcode. And you want to, one, be able to not just have a barcode for your particular retail product, but a barcode associated with each order hierarchy. So if you're selling, let's say if you're selling bottles and 12 bottles come in a case. So you would have a barcode that you have to purchase for the bottles, as well as a barcode associated with that 12 count case count. And if you have two different type of products or two SKUs, then barcodes for that mixed case. If you have make sure that you're shipper ready. So if you're have a product, and most likely this is in regards towards if your product is ambient, so it means shelf stable, you want to have a barcode associated with your shipper. A shipper is what you'll see when you see Lay's, chips, or Oreos on the end of an aisle, that cardboard, that is a shipper display. Okay. So that is all the things you want to when you want to consider on first hand on being retail ready is do you have that in line? Then you want to go into your certification. Are you SQF certified? Okay, and to be you, for instance, you can be in some retailers and some local stores intrastate if you don't have that SQF certification, depending. But once you really want to start talking about anchor retail or just become being retail ready, so you can be ready for any buyer or food service buyer, you want to have your SQF certification, and Discover is a level 1 or level 2 required for you. And that's the main things that I would say as far as being retail ready on just the initial portion.
Yeah, that's incredibly helpful having that barcode. And did you say SQF or SQF?
Yes, yes, SQF certification. Yes.
SQF certification.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
yes.
related towards the facility. So your facility that you're manufacturing in would need to have that. So if you're utilizing a shared kitchen space right now, or if you're working out of home and now you're thinking, okay, I need to think about a shared kitchen. Ask your shared kitchen partner what facility certifications they have, right? To be able to leverage that. Or if you're thinking about, going out and having your own location, I would say just make sure you have your food and safety certifications on hand.
Okay, yes. Thank you so much. That is really helpful. And I see some questions in the chat, and I just want folks to know there are going to be resources shared afterwards. So don't worry, we're gonna have everything for you. Okay, Amie, I want to ask you this next question. Can you share your journey to retail with Carolyn's Krisps, and what first steps did you took, and what made you feel ready to approach retailers?
Totally. Good question. So my journey started honestly being kind of thrown into the food world. I had an idea, I had my grandma's recipe. My background was not in food at all. So I really started with being like, okay, let me figure out how much I can learn and how fast I can learn this to start getting into retail. And I also am always this person that's like, I want to test, I want to learn, and then I want to reiterate. So doing it and doing it sustainably was my biggest thing of like, okay, so, what can I get involved in? I'm in Chicago, so there's a program here with the hatchery. It's called Sprouts. And so that was an incubator program that they literally helped me from the beginning understand, starting from my kitchen, doing like one pan at a time in the oven, to being like, okay, you're actually moving to manufacturing now. Here's all the things you need to do. So I would suggest if someone is like, if this is a whole new world to them, finding that even, it's just nice to have that community with, business owners to be able to like, okay, we're all kind of starting new. Here's some experts. How do we grow this thing? So that was like one of my first things I did. And then the other thing was really understanding like who our customer was and how were we going to stand out from any competitors that were similar to us. And how do I even get some really good feedback pretty fast? So I mean, I'm all about, at least from like a food perspective, we did so many markets, so many like farmers markets, but other markets like art and like kind of higher end craft fairs where we could stand out and actually have customers taste right away for the first 6 months. And I soaked up like every single comment to be like, okay, what is working? What's not? Are people understanding what these flavors are? How are we communicating this? Like everything full circle. And that was like our phase one. And then once that happened, I was like, okay, we've got some good feedback. Let's make some changes to our packaging and get more ready for like to be on shelf, like Michael was saying. So it was really being like, okay, I'll get in this a little deeper, I think, but like later, but the pricing, is that right? How does our colorway work on a shelf? Um, how do we, I don't know, like what are our best sellers? Like I think I started out with one SKU and now we have more than that, but we really have three standouts. So it was like just from those in-person tests, it was really great to be like, okay, we're actually selling product, we're getting customers who love us locally, and we're getting customer feedback to be like, let's take this to the next level of retail instead of just like putting a lot of eggs in one basket into retail right away and being like, I hope it works, but I could actually go to a buyer and be like, I actually have data for you and people like our items and here's why. So
Yes. Oh, that is super helpful, especially it seems like regardless of the industry you're in, whether it's like food or something else, that having that data to back up that you are a product that people are going to want to buy is going to be so valuable for you when you get into stores or trying to get into stores. Um,
totally.
Okay, Michael, what are the top three requirements and expectations retailers have before they place an order?
Well, let's look at it from the standpoint of, when you think about your product compliance, branding alignment, and then supply chain reliability. So first, let's talk on that product compliance. We kind of talked about it a little bit before, which is I always tell people when you think about being product compliant, think about it. Do you have the information required for the inventory item upload? That is the easiest way to think about being product compliant. So what that means is all of the information that buyer is going to need enable for the your product to be registered in their inventory and into their warehouse. That's what it's going to take. So do you know your measurements, right, for your product, so that this way when the merchandising teams are doing planogramming, they have the dimensions of your product. That's not oftentimes thought about as part of being a product compliant. Your shelf life studies. Do you know your shelf life studies for this? Do you know the different type of, can your product, does it always have to be frozen and then slack? So frozen means if it's going to come in frozen, and slack means it's thawed on, then it's thawed that way. Is it refrigerated? What happens? Do you know your minimum and maximum temperatures, right? That your product can be at before it then starts to spoil or it can no longer be sold, right? That's really when you think about being product compliant, all the way down to the manufacturer, right? You have to be able to list your facility for traceability. So, do you know your supply chain? So I know we talked about those branding alignment, but while we're on the product compliance, let's go over to the supply chain piece, right? So your supply chain reliability is very important. And it's very important because, well, let's be honest. If let's say if for whatever reason your product sells out at a quicker movement rate than expected, what is your controlled order lead time? So if your product goes viral and then it goes off the shelf, is that a 10-day order window from the time the retailer can be able to expect it on the shelf? It is, do you know that? And then based on that, what is your order lead time for your raw materials for you to manufacture? So if you're saying that you have a 10-day lead time, that's saying that that within that 10 days, maybe from day one through day five, maybe you're manufacturing that product and getting it ready to go to your distributor or warehouse or DSD. But in that time, did you have to do any, or do you have to do any ordering of raw materials and packaging? And if so, pre-plan that, right? And base that on your order MOQ, so your minimum quantity orders. So if you know that you're expecting 30 cases to be ordered every so often, then how much raw material and packaging do you need to have on hand? And do you know the order lead times from each organization that you'll be buying from? So that's on that part for the supply chain reliability, as well as, and DSD is direct to store. By the way. So and then looking at that branding alignment, does your product fit in that aisle? Have you, this really goes what Amie was talking about. You can have the best tasting item in the world, but does it match the planogram sets for your buyer? How much in-store research and development have you done? Right? Even down towards if you do have a healthy food item.
Oh, Michael, I don't know if it's just for me, but you're cutting out.
Better for you, right? So, can you guys still hear me?
You cut out for a little bit, so I think it just cut out for maybe 20 seconds. So can we
Okay, so I'm
rewind
going to
20 seconds?
rewind a
Okay,
little.
yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and rewind a little
Yeah.
bit. So what I was saying was I'll start back at the branding alignment. So the branding alignment, thinking about your planogram, how much time have you invested understanding planograms, both from all the different stores that you want to source from. So the way you're going to look at a planogram set, if you're trying to sell to 7-Eleven, is different than what you're going to try to look at Kroger or Publix or Ralph's, depending where you are, right? As well as Costco. So when you're creating your product pitch decks, are you making sure that it's speaking towards that buying organization? Is going to be very important, as well as does it match their private label patterns? So let's go into that. So, for instance, if you have a better for you product and you're trying to sell for Kroger, can that better for you product, is it going to be competition or aligned with Simple Truth? Right? Or Simple Truth Organic. Can can you see that same product being sold there? And then the last part about brand alignment is when you are pitching for your product to be put on the shelf, you are also pitching on how your product can add additional items into the cart. If so when you're talking about to the buyer, sure, you can tell them how great your product is and what it can do for the customer, but can you describe at minimum the other, at least two other items at minimum that your customer is going to buy because your item is in store? So I'll pause on that part.
That is so, there's so much good information in there, and just expanding, like you said, and thinking about truly how long is it going to take if something sells out, like really having strong clarity around that and
Mhm.
preparing yourself for those situations at hand. So you don't end up being like,
Yep.
oh, it's going to be 10 days, now it's going to be 30. And then you like, I'm putting boxes together at 6 o'clock in my house. So it's so helpful though. And I love what you said about thinking about the supplier's own private brand, because I feel like whether you're in the room, you have a food product or something else, like, that different organizations, different suppliers, they always have that private label, private selections, truth,
Uh-huh.
all those good things. And so you want to know how they're going to stack up. I never would have thought about that. So
Yeah.
helpful
Hmm.
like setting yourself apart.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, Amie, my next question is for you. When you started first talking to retail buyers, what surprised you most and what do you wish you'd known sooner?
I mean, Michael touched on a lot of it, but I think it is really having everything laid out, especially when you have your pitch deck, you have your pricing, your how big are your cases, how are you going to get it to them? Like being really like you can't show up and be like, I don't know how many we're going to have in a case or like I don't know our like minimums or like no, they don't want to deal with that because you want to be buyers are busy. They want you to come in and be as ticked and tied as you can, And there's always room for conversation, like for us, because when we were first starting out, we didn't have a big distributor. But for instance, we launched with Mariano's, which is under the Kroger banner, earlier this year. And when we pitched to them, I was like, we are open to who your like preferences for a distributor. We ended up going with KeHE, which is a large nationwide distributor, but it was like a very strategic move that we partnered on. And we talked to quite a few distributors in that case. So it wasn't like an absolutely no because we didn't have it set up, but it was like the conversation was there, but we had everything else ready to go. So I think that was maybe not like a surprise, but it was just like, okay, I didn't know all these things starting out. So you just need to have all of that together. And having, again, like buyers are busy, like being able to keep up, like keep that kind of constant contact without being too much, like just being like, I'm still here, because you never know. Maybe the time wasn't right the first few times you reached out, and then maybe it hits eventually, like a few months later. But I've actually had the most success, not even just from that cold outreach, but just getting so involved in the business groups locally. Like for us, naturally, Chicago is huge. We have a food and beverage network of the Midwest that I'm in. And like just being like startup CPG, if you're also in like the CPG space. But like they do events and it's all for these like up and coming businesses that you can meet buyers and just have like your names out there, your faces out there, and you're starting to build those relationships because that is by far the most important of being like personable and being there telling about your brand. So I think that has been a huge help to be like, okay, now I can even follow up with like, great seeing you at this event. Just a reminder, here's my brand. Would love to continue that conversation or however that follow up looks like. I think in general too, I guess maybe the bigger surprise for me was not the buyers, but in general, like retail is expensive.
Mm.
And really understanding the cost of retail. So when you're doing your pricing, I can't price for a Kroger to be like, okay, this is my direct price, because if you get a distributor, that's going to change significantly. And
Mm.
so really knowing when you do your pricing, there's all these levels. So it's, you to the distributor and the distributor to them, and kind of buffering that in to be like, that is going to be our on shelf price. And then there's something else I was going to say. I lost my thought. Oh, but it's expensive and it needs to be really, and there's all these other fees that end up coming in that could be your EDI processing fees. So you
Yeah.
pay for this program of how you how you get your PO from a retailer, how you accept it, and then how you invoice them. It's not through email. It's through a different processing system that as a brand you have to pay for. So there's all these little things that you just need to be aware of. And I think unless you are some sort of venture-backed brand, your growth in retail is going to be a little different than it
Amen.
is like we're self-funded. And yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah, that is incredibly helpful, like having that full idea of the cost.
Mhm.
What is EDI again? You mentioned it. Um,
Michael, what does it stand
Mhm.
for?
So EDI is your electronic data integration.
There you go.
So,
oh,
what they're, and I'm so glad that if I can talk on this just briefly,
yes.
the importance of that. Amy brought out a very good point. Um, when getting the purchase order, people think that now they won. That's actually when the stress starts.
Mm.
And I say that in all lovingness. And that is because there is so many fees and different things. So I always say, do you have 10 to 20 grand available to get into retail? Right. So, and then also when you do even think about EDI, there's some relief that can sometimes come with that, and that can come in terms of the type of broker you have. So depending on if your broker can take on some of those responsibilities of that item upload and accepting the purchase order, but also thinking about your deductions. They can handle the deductions and fight deductions. Understand it doesn't matter how great your shipping is or what that looks like. You're going to have deductions and possibly even chargebacks. Do you know how to manage and argue down and really appeal those chargebacks? It is very important. I've seen so many people come into retail and go bankrupt in less than a year just between the fees of starting their on the shelf process after they have the purchase order to then actually having to actually pay for the removal of their product off the shelf because they weren't ready.
And
Yeah.
I think to
Mhm.
play off that too, I mean, understanding like, yeah, the processing fees, the EDI, but even like the promotions, like that has to be
Yes.
bulked in there too, because retailers want you to do, so many promotions per year
Hmm.
to get your name out there. And it's to get that tag so people know you're there so they'll buy you. So that's one thing. But I also was going to say, and we've done this a lot, is really getting involved with like the local or small business programs. Like all the big distributors have them. And, there's a lot of, even though a lot of stores have them, so you'll pitch, like maybe there's 10 of you that get picked to go pitch for like a Fresh Time or a Sprouts or whoever, but like they do these programs that a lot of those fees do get waived in a certain capacity. And so it's like, I tell everyone I know, if you're starting a business and getting a retail, like look for those and get involved as much as you can because it does help a ton.
Yeah, definitely start go local, not enterprise.
Yeah.
And in regards towards how do you get a distributor or a broker, well, most distributors, you have to have at least one anchor account before they will take you on. And then that anchor account would generally have to be at a certain minimum of a case count for that. The best thing that you can do is really start to discover the different type of distributors that are available so that you can be able to call them on hand once you have their benchmarks to do business. The same thing with a broker. You'll have some brokers that says, "Oh yeah, I can go pitch your product," but a really good broker, you're really pitching to that broker to be in that network. So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that is I feel like wow, I'm learning so much. Obviously, I don't know anything about this, but this is so helpful in figuring out, especially when you're getting involved with all these different people, how to even assess if someone is going to be the right person to bring into your business or to support
Yeah.
you. So that was really, really helpful. And just understanding the cost because, Michael, you said it like everyone thinks like when you get that order, like that's it, I've made it. And then all of these other costs coming with it, which can be a great opportunity if you're prepared. So that's what I love about this conversation. Okay, so I do think we talked a little bit about this, but Michael, this question's for you. From an operations standpoint, what common pitfalls do you see small businesses face with like inventory, lead time, supplier integration, and how can they avoid those?
Absolutely. So I would say, really not having their procurement back office prepared,
Mhm.
right? When you're looking at when you're looking at your back office for procurement, it really goes into think about the current state of supply chain. You can have product packaging, and or you can be with a co-packer. If that co-packer, shuts down or says they're no longer going to be manufacturing that product, always have a plan to have a relationship and be ready for another relationship with a co-packer. Because I cannot tell you, and even happens with private label brands, that a customer will fall in love with a product and then they go, "Oh, this is off a shelf? Huh, I thought that this sold." Yeah, it did sell, but the co-packer is no longer making it. Right. So that's why it's not in store. And in retail, anytime you have anytime that your product is off the shelf, it goes in a couple waves. You have off the shelf for 2 weeks, you go into you get a little flag, a warning, and then your product is really kind of in review. If you're at 4 weeks, you're in deletion review. Right. And then deletion review is saying that they're looking at not only that current product that is on the shelf that is out, but if you're a brand and you have multiple products, even within that retailer, they reserve the right to now review your whole portfolio. So you could be doing well in a whole nother space, but I'm sorry, we're going to look at your portfolio because brand recognition and association, and now you can take that bigger risk on that side. So I would really say understanding your supply chain. I'm going to say it again. Your order lead time is just so important. And thankfully, Amie mentioned it. If you're not ready to talk about your in-store promotional pricing and participations, just don't waste your time unless you're going into a local program, as she mentioned, right? Because then you'll have a little bit of cushion because that local program will probably come with some local tags or some type of marketing tags with that. But Are you, and let's really talk on what is promotional pricing and why she's saying be prepared to have that budget. So let's say if you're selling something for $1, if the everyday price is $1 on the shelf, well, when you see that discounted for 50 cents off, the grocery retailer's not taking that hit. Okay. So that means for every time, so let's say if you're in 100 or 10 stores, let's minimize it. If you're in 10 stores and if you have 100 customers that are scanning that item out for 50 cents off, you're going to get an invoice from your retailer worth the value of those checkouts, and you have to pay that. Okay. Your retailer does not, when you see a sale, understand that unless it is a store manager sale, but when it is when it's promotional sale, you're responsible for that. Even when it's a store manager sale, you might have some buyback charges coming down the pike. But no, okay, for instance, if you're selling hot dogs, do you know the different weeks, and this is where data comes in important, that hot dogs are discounted? Because you mean to tell me that Hans and Nathan's is going to be on sale, but you're full price? Well, you can't blame and say, well, Hans and Nathan's is so big, that's why they're moving. No, they're moving because they did the promotional pricing on the particular weeks, right? Are you prepared for your 4th of July buying, right? And those buying habits. Are you prepared for buy one, get one free? These are the things to really hone in on and focus. Your product storytelling is this much of the pitch. Okay. Your product storytelling is this much of the pitch. It's really about your product benefits, your in-store participations, your foot traffic, and fulfillment strategy. If I can't check any of those things off, I'm never sending it to a buyer to review for planogramming.
Mm. Wow, I had no idea about the deals, but you're so right. As a consumer, like we're looking for the sales. I'm just gonna buy whatever's cheapest. I'm just gonna buy whatever's cheapest, especially if I'm having people over my house.
Yeah.
Listen, it's 2 for $5. You're gonna get these $5 hot dogs. But
Yeah.
it's just really helpful to know, and again, calls back to understanding the data and understanding your price point, so you aren't basically losing money now that you've gotten into retail or into a store. And I love that you mentioned the pitch, because in a little bit we have a question for you about pitching. But Amie, my next question is for you. How did you approach packaging, pricing, and branding to make your product stand out? And what changes have you made based on your retailer or your customer feedback so far?
Yeah, totally. And real quick, one thing I want to add to what we were just saying is a free fill. So we can talk about this a little later, but thinking about your promotion and a free fill, a lot of retailers like Kroger, Sprouts,
Yep.
anybody, they will automatically require a free fill. So that is like almost a case of each SKU to
Yep.
launch in stores.
Yep.
So unless you have some sort of agreement otherwise, you will automatically, like, say one store, fine, can do that. You get into like 200 stores, 250, and you are fully giving free product just to launch. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So that's another real quick back to the like
Yeah.
the pricing and budgeting for retail. That is something a lot of people don't always know about, and it is a shock if you didn't know the first time.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is,
Um,
it's helpful to understand too, as you scale, how you can prepare for those like bigger orders. Cause yeah, one store, like you said, okay,
Fine.
200 stores, whoa.
That's a lot. It's a lot
Yeah.
of product. Yeah. But back to your kind of packaging pricing question. So when we started, I mean, we were scrappier than ever. I had bags, I had stickers. It was very time consuming, and it was like, but what my whole thing was back to that kind of testing, learning, like iterating, was I'm gonna get something out there. I want to understand the feedback, and then we're gonna like make some moves. So we quickly went from stickers to getting pre-printed packaging. And my other thing was back to the financial, like I wasn't ready to invest in, you know, 15,000 bags if I didn't know what my change was going to be or my initial design.
Yeah.
So, that like tiered approach. So we had our stickers, we had our brand on there, had our flavors, but I think pretty quickly it became obvious for us that people wanted to know, like, if you think about it, you don't read a ton when you're shopping, you respond to color. And I
Mm.
remember I was in a Target retailer program a while ago, and I think on average you read 7 words during a grocery trip in store,
Wow.
which means you're looking at shapes and colors and what is, grabbing you. And so that really sat with me because I was like, okay, if people aren't reading our tiny words on here, how do we catch their attention? So pretty quickly we were like, let's add more color per flavor. So people are like, okay, I love your cinnamon one, but I like the pink one. They don't even say cinnamon sometimes, or I like your blue one. That's our cheddar. That was a really big takeaway from us. And then also that personalization was people want to know who Carolyn is. They want to know the story, and it's on the back. So, it definitely will, they have to read it more, but it's like it does tell our story more than we did in the past. So those were our two biggest things, just with packaging alone. With pricing, again, I was going from buying ingredients in a grocery store to sourcing them from large distributors and really looking at our price breaks and depending on what quantity, because as a brand, there's always a cash flow, right? And your cash flow problem in a way is like you're paying up front for all these ingredients that you have to use and manufacture, whether it's you manufacturing or co-man, and this could be any industry, but how do you afford to pay all this money up front? And then you're on probably like a 30, 60-day net cycle with retailers. So I was like, okay, how can I understand our ingredient suppliers? How do I go as direct as possible versus going through always a third party? That was one of my things. And we've built some really good relationships with some of our suppliers of being like, okay, we are sourcing from some pretty big people, maybe mainly because I was pretty persistent and wanted to they were like we were tiny, we're still very tiny, but it was like just give us a chance. Like we're growing, like let's get this sourcing set up. But where are our price breaks? And so if we start with 10,000 pounds of flour now, and then what's our jump? Like where can we save a little money? And knowing that we're pricing for that, but also you can't undercut yourself either. Because if you go too low and you're trying to make up your margin at the back end, it's going to be really hard. So we are a little bit more premium priced. The goal is not to forever be at our current on shelf price, but it is what we can do to sustain instead of being like, we're taking 5% margin and there's no way you could run that in a retail setting and still survive,
Thank you. Thank you.
you
Yeah,
know? So.
Yeah.
that is super
Can I add
helpful.
on to that
Yes,
last part
please.
that you just mentioned? And why is that important? As for when she's talking about 5% doesn't work. Well, you have to think about a couple of things. It goes back to when she said that you're not going to be getting paid for, sometimes if you're local, you might be on a 10 or 14, but just go into the business thinking you're going to be on a net term payment of 30, which means you're not going to see your money for 45 days, right? So, with that in mind, your purchase order is only for your product. There's no marketing that's associated with that. So, you have to actually pull from your case value about, I always tell people 10 to 15%, if you can, is ideal for marketing. But at minimum, do you have a 5% that, you can, be able to pull from that? So some of that float money that you're going to need in between production, in between that next check you're going to get. You have to be able to have that margin. That's not take home money. That is operational money. So really have to be understand your margin, and within that margin, how is that percentage divided between your must have or your required expenses?
Yeah. Oh,
Absolutely.
so much good information. And I love just having like the full frame of like what you need to understand as you're going on this journey. Okay, Michael, I feel like this question is going to be like really like kind of what people want to know.
Okay.
In your experience, what makes a retail pitch successful or what makes it fall flat?
Absolutely. And you're right. So we did talk on this earlier. So product benefits. I'm going to list them again, and then I'll go through what each one is. Product benefits, I'll explain what that means. In-store participations, we touched on that a little bit. Foot traffic and fulfillment strategy, as well as knowing your on-the-shelf best practices. So let's talk about product benefits. Product benefits means, I understand that your grandmother gave you that recipe and everyone loved it. That is not the product story I care about. That's irrelevant. I want to know about your product benefits as towards what's the ROI and what are you doing towards strengthening that commodity? Okay. So, I want to be able to know according towards your raw ingredients, right? What is the benefit of us sourcing for that? So the product benefits is that, well, this much of our stuff is sourced locally or is domestic, so you don't have to worry about any supply chain delays. That's a product benefit, right? Directly. Another product benefit is well, if I'm selling strawberry milk, according, I'm getting this tax credit from the Department of Agriculture to be able to move it. Understanding, that piece. Understanding honestly, well, how are you a stakeholder within that? So, for instance, let's go right back to the strawberry milk. How many gallons of milk will you now be buying, and what is that actually doing towards an ecosystem, right? In regards towards that, do you know the commodity that you are in and your market share, right? So for instance, if you have a product and you say it's innovative, it's only as innovative as towards the market share that you can say that you're going to have that you currently have in the market with that. So that is why making sure that you have good foot traffic and you have a lot of consumer awareness being driven because cool it's a great product, but if you're coming to the retail and say, well, right now we have a 5% market share on in this great category, well, that 95% of market share is living where, and why wouldn't they go after the 95% when you only have a 5% market share? Is it because you just need a landing zone because you have so many customers that want it, but e-commerce isn't feasible for you? Tell that story then if you do currently have a low market share as towards how you have a low market share as far as data, but you do have the consumer awareness and education that's going to drive foot traffic, as well as do you know your product movement rate? That's part of your product benefits. So, can you tell your retailer on average how many units will move each week off of the shelf, right? That's going to be, it's going to be super important when you're thinking about that standpoint. And then, like I said, once again, product benefits, what other items is going to be purchased, with this. That is part of it. So build the cart before you pitch to retail. Build the cart. And then on top of that, what I want you to do is I want you to take your pricing and then the pricing of those other items and show us, guess what, the total checkout amount. Not just on yours, but I want to see what are you telling me that at minimum this new customer, right, is now going to check out. And also, retail isn't here to sell stuff to their current customers. Retailers are putting something on the shelf to get a customer from another retailer. So that means that that product is a new customer that purchased your product as well as additional pre-existing products in the store.
Wow. I don't even I keep saying like I love it. There's so many good pieces of information because there genuinely is so much good information, but I love like that mantra of build the cart,
Build a cart.
before. Yes, build the cart. That's what we're going to
Only
keep
thing that matters to me, build the cart. Build
saying.
the cart.
Yes. Okay, Amie, my next question is for you. How have you built and maintained retailer relationships to keep your products on shelves?
A lot of it, I kind of touched on this before, but it really is relationships. I mean, I think business in general is building those relationships, but it's either the constant like follow up of check in, like especially for us, for Mariano's, for instance, that was our biggest retailer that we were like, okay, this is new for us. How are we doing? How can we get better? Like really keeping that line open. But also even just in the beginning was showing up to those events. Like I walked a ton of trade shows or got involved with those local programs I mentioned to be like, just start kind of having my name out there and meeting those people and getting to know the Whole Foods buyer and trying to figure out, maybe if we're not a fit right now, if I could get some advice. Like it doesn't always have to be that hard sell either to really build that connection with somebody. Because, like I said, maybe the time's not right now. Maybe they're, also which we probably haven't totally talked on is the cycle of review for each category, which is totally different depending on what category you're in per store. And so like it's a year-long process. Like it happens once a year, for instance, for cookie crackers for us. And so sometimes if you miss that window, you got to wait a whole nother year to pitch again. But at least you're constantly having that contact to not just show up once a year and be like, hey, I'm here to pitch again. So I think that, and then we're also, especially, this is how we've built locally and how, as we continue to expand, we are going to do is demos and being in person and sampling. And that, the store managers appreciate, our buyers love, like that can actually even be built into your promo schedule. So maybe you're not taking $1 off or something, but that is part of your plan of marketing and how you're going to support this to keep moving product because that's the best way of like you're also like customers are being told your story face to face. It's like taking that farmers market kind of market mentality, but bringing it to a bigger retail world that you can still meet the customers where they're at.
Yeah. Oh, that is such helpful information in thinking about how you can translate that still that personal reach and also having the mindset of like there is a review cycle. Maybe I missed it. Let me stay in contact. Michael, how can inclusivity and accessibility strengthen retail partnerships and supply chains? Oh, you're on mute.
And I'm glad you brought this up. So what inclusivity looks like to me is is about your ecosystem partners, right? How inclusive, and once again, she keeps bringing it up, which is you see how she's out in the market, right? She's in it. You can have as much impact storytelling. So when it comes towards inclusivity, as far as like impact, and diverse, ignore it. And I say that because that's not the ROI for anybody or for you. And just to be frank, sometimes being diverse can, or really leading with that diverse storytelling or minority storytelling can hurt you. And it can hurt you because now let's say if you're a black owned brand, well, if you're pushing, oh, this is black owned, well, get ready only to be part of marketing during the month of February
Mm,
because that's how you're pushing yourself out in the market. You're saying that that's your customer. Well, then you can't complain any all the other months when you're saying, well, we're low on the shelf. You're marketing yourself as a particular into you're saying I'm part of a segment market. I'm not here for all customers. So I would really be careful with your storytelling and how you're reaching it. And I was saying this when I was on the DNI desk, right? Which was have the certification in the background, but and you can have your We Bank or National Minority Supplier Development Council certification or any of those. Those are good, but they can hurt you when it comes towards your marketing capabilities. I'll just be honest. So it's something to really think about is you want to pick when you're doing that storytelling that storytelling is for the customer. It is not for your buyer. Okay. On that part. And then when you want to think about it is And part of being inclusive is, are you saying, I don't have a distributor, I don't have a consultant, and I don't have a broker? So you mean to tell me you're tackling this all by yourself, but those inclusive partners, the broker is going to know the buying schedule before you will. The broker is going to be able to send in samples all throughout the year because the broker is going to lunch with the buyer. Your distributor is going to be able to give you a purchase order quicker than the retailer is because the distributor has to bring it into the house. So, that's the real tea, if I can be frank. And Amie, please chime in if you feel.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The one thing I was thinking about when you were talking about the like certifications is I have used that as talking to buyers and stores to be like, do you guys offer anything? So like for instance, it was I think it was Kroger, it was Mariano's.
Hmm?
They waived our free fill going forward because
And
I had
slotting
the
fees.
like women's own certification. So that is where it comes in. Because I was always like, why do I have to get certified to be a woman? Because I it's pretty obvious. But those things do come into play. And I agree. So we are actually getting a broker next year, starting. So we've signed. I can't wait because it'll take a lot of the paperwork off of
Yeah,
my desk.
congratulations.
Thank you. But it's funny because that was something I didn't know really existed. And I agree, brokers, like once you get to that point, they are pitching their brands all at once to retailers that they're targeting based on what you've worked with them on. And so to me, it makes so much sense because retailers, they don't want to deal with one brand at a time, whereas a broker will be like, these are who we've got. This is why they're great. Here's the plan. And it's just more ticked and tied. So I do think once people get to that point, it's more than worth it to start looking into. And no, it's a longer game, is what I've been warned, but it's not an overnight like pop, but it's worth an investment because they have the relationships, they know the schedules, like you said, for
Yes.
sure.
Plus the in-store required merchandising. We didn't talk
Yeah.
about that at all, but I'll take 30 seconds. For every store that you in, it's best practice you as a supplier that you have merchandisers that can check on your product in the shelf, and your broker can do that, and it can be included in that 4 to 20% brokerage fee that they have for that, so you don't have to pay that out of pocket.
Ooh, okay. So there's like all these multiple benefits to having that. And I like how you mentioned that as part of the inclusivity of doing this work. Now, we only have about 4 minutes left in this webinar, and I'm thinking I should have made this a 2 hour webinar, but I didn't know what I didn't know. I feel like that's my theme for this content.
Part two. We'll do a
Part
part two.
two. We need a part two. So I want to really quickly, though, Michael, you have a roadmap, right, for folks, because I think a lot of people are wanting just a little bit more guidance, and we're going to share links so you can stay in touch with Amie and Michael. But Michael, would you mind talking a little bit more? Because we're going to share that email
Absolutely.
so that people know, because I think it's going to answer a lot of our Q&A questions.
Yes, yes. So I have a retail readiness roadmap, and we also even offer courses for that. We offer the market run prep roadmap. So market run prep takes you through identifying your goals, the KPIs, and tasks required. So those goals can range from I just want to get GS1 certified, which is your barcode, all the way to I need to be ready to the for the buyer and or scale. So then we look at, well, what are the key performance indicators associated with that, the task work that's required. That task work could range from certifications towards that. We then look at the bottlenecks and roadblocks that you're going to have, particularly according towards where you are with the market. Discovering the ideal ecosystem partners that can drive you to the market, defining how's the capital going to be garnered, both internally and externally. How prepared are you for to be able to just talk to purchase order financiers, because that is a thing. If you have a large purchase order, then you can be able to get that finance, and some of them are even debt backed. So this is when debt is actually good for the business. We look at storytelling and marketing, as well as knowing your pitch. That's your company and route to market pitch, not your product. Then we have the Destination Success Roadmap, which really goes over everything that we just talked about today, from knowing your pitch, on the shelf best practices, back office procurement, all the third parties, as well as your internal and external campaign awareness to be able to drive that foot traffic. But we're here to help. As much as possible, and or we, like I said, we do offer once a month. We'd have a program where suppliers can just hop on a call once a month with me, quarterly program. So that's 3 sessions for once a month to, and I think tank with you for an hour about towards where you are, and help you really liaison as you're navigating into the market. But I hope this was helpful.
Yes, thank you so much for giving more context, because I do think, one, we're going to need a part two. So, everyone, if you're like, hey, we didn't get to my question, it's on me. Okay. We had a lot of good information to cover, but what we're going to do is we're going to send out this recording. So if you needed something, or you were like, hey, I need to go back to that, the recording is going to be sent out. I want you to keep an eye on your inbox that you registered for this webinar with. So that's going to have all of the resources where you can stay in touch with Amie, where you can stay in touch with Michael, and also the recording. And then we'll follow up with some additional resources. We are here to support you. Obviously, like, there are so many experts. I want to thank Prince Michael Jett and Amie Kesler of Carolyn's Krisps for coming and sharing so much valuable information today. And I want to thank all of the entrepreneurs who took time out of your very busy day to join, and we hope you got additional information that is helpful to you. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye.